Ai, amiga, nem te conto. Fala, amiga. Fala que eu te escuto. Então, sabe o Zeca lá da academia? Não conheço, não, mas acho que você já me falou dele. O que aconteceu? Ah, então, eu saí com ele a semana passada. Não tinha te contado ainda. Precisava te contar. Nossa, que legal. E aí, como ele é? Como já faz um tempinho, assim, eu vou te contar mais ou menos o que eu lembro, então, né? Mas então, nossa, ele é super bonito, assim, uns traços bonitos, meio loiro, olho claro, alto, forte. A gente foi no restaurante também super legal, super fino que tinha perto da casa dele. Foi muito legal. Ai, que bom, amiga. Tem uma foto aí pra eu ver? Ai, tenho sim, olha aqui. Dan, dan. Ah, ah, entendi. Ai, acho que tem aqui também uma foto do lugar que a gente foi também, ó. Ah, hum. Você já parou pra pensar que às vezes as coisas que a gente acha que a gente lembra, talvez não sejam exatamente aquilo que realmente aconteceu? Pode ter começado de um jeito bem bobinho, mas na verdade o assunto do vídeo é sério. A gente vai falar de memórias construídas e memórias esquecidas.
A percepção e a memória são processos construtivos, influenciados não só pelas nossas crenças, mas também pelos nossos sentidos, conhecimentos e expectativas. Vamos ver no vídeo a seguir o que é a memória e como ela funciona.
So, what is memory? Memory is essentially a learning that has persisted over time, or information that has been stored and can be retrieved. Throughout our lives, we are constantly bombarded by our senses. Everything we see, hear, and smell cannot possibly be recorded into memory. Each of our five senses all begin as electrical impulses traveling through the brain. As each sensation relates to one another, tiny synaptic junctions form. These are basics for how memories are stored within the brain. As each relates to one another, the memory formation becomes stronger and more accessible. Essentially, our brains remember things by association.
Let's look at the difference between top-down and bottom-up processing. Bottom-up processing begins with the stimulus. So let's imagine that we're looking at something. So if I know absolutely nothing about something, the stimulus basically is influencing my perception. So for example, let's imagine that I'm looking at a cockpit of a plane. I'm not a pilot, so I'm not really too familiar with everything, and everything kind of looks fairly confusing. So basically all the different stimuli, so this stimulus, a bunch of gauges and this rudder looking thing, I'm basically looking at all the different little parts of something that is new and novel to me and trying to kind of comprehend what it is that I'm looking at. So this is bottom up. This is when you start with no preconceived idea of what it is that you're looking at. So bottom up processing is data driven, and your perception of what it is that you're looking at directs your cognitive awareness of the object. So in contrast, top down basically uses your background knowledge. So it uses your background knowledge to influence perception. So let's look at this example over here. So we're looking at this set of circles, these white circles with lines drawn inside of them. We're creating this cube. We're basically taking these lines and then putting them together in order to create a cube. Even though the stimulus itself, which is the circles with the lines, actually doesn't draw a cube because there are these black spaces over here and there's absolutely nothing in the black spaces, but our brains are basically taking this information and using our knowledge of cubes and what they're supposed to look like, we're recreating a cube despite a lack of a cube actually being present in the image. So that's top-down processing, is using your background information, your background knowledge, your learning, your expectations in order to influence what it is that we're perceiving. So in other words, it's theory-driven. We look at this and we assume that they're trying to represent a cube even though one's not actually drawn there. And we're using that theory in order to shape our cognitive understanding of what it is that we're looking at. Whereas in bottom-up processing, we're using the stimulus itself in order to drive our perception.
Vimos nos vídeos anteriores como a memória é formada e como ela afeta a nossa percepção da realidade. Mas nem sempre podemos confiar na nossa memória. Ela pode ser influenciada por outras pessoas, por más condições de visibilidade e pelo nosso estado emocional. Vamos ver alguns exemplos.
Can we really trust personal anecdotes as objective descriptions of real events? Consider the following experiment. Suppose you are shown the following film footage of an automobile accident. If I were to ask you about how fast were the cars going when they hit each other, what would your guess be? 25 miles per hour maybe? Or perhaps 35? Well, as it turns out, people are actually not very good at visually estimating the speed of impact for automobile accidents such as this. So even though the true speed was only 25 miles per hour, most control groups tend to estimate values on the order of 34 miles per hour. Now let's shake things up a bit. Although it is interesting that people tend to overestimate the collision speed, we are here for another reason. Suppose I replace the word hit with the word smashed. In all respects, this is exactly the same question as before, but now I've inserted a verb with a slightly more potent connotation. Surely, the mere phrasing of a question would not influence the answer a subject gives, would it? Wrong! As it turns out, simply replacing the word hit with the word smashed can bias the subject's responses to over 40 miles per hour. And to make matters even more interesting, a whole continuum of values can be obtained from a whole slew of verbs. There are basically two ways to interpret the results. One possibility is that subjects are simply uncertain in their response, and the nature of the question biases the answer. For example, suppose you're not sure if the speed was closer to 30 miles per hour or 40. When you hear the word smashed, you might subconsciously take it as a subtle hint that the speeds were relatively high, and so you respond accordingly. An alternative explanation is that the question itself actually tricks the subject's memory into seeing the accident as being more violent than it really was. That is to say, when you retroactively review the video footage in your mind, the word smashed conjures up a memory of an event that was more intense than reality.
Well, imagine a situation that you're sitting in a dinner party. You have a pretty good memory of some situation that happened, and you actually remember it happening in a certain way. But all of your friends are telling you that you're actually wrong. They're saying that something else happened.
Social pressures can make us change the way we tell stories. But can they also make us change the stories we tell ourselves? Our actual memories? Tally and Micah set up an experiment to find out. They bring in a group of volunteers to watch a film together. Afterwards, the volunteers answer basic questions about the film to test what they remember. A few days later, the participants take the same questionnaire inside a brain scanner.
This time they were exposed to fake answers that were supposedly given by their fellow group members.
The group is led to believe that the others who took the test remembered the character in the film was not wearing a hat. And most people changed their answers to go along with the crowd.
Almost 70% of the cases, the participants conformed and they gave a wrong answer, even though they were initially pretty confident about their correct answer. So we test them again a week after, once we've removed the social pressure, and we assume that if they're still making an error, that means that their memory was actually changed.
Tally and Micah found that most test subjects stuck with the wrong answer even without peer pressure. The falsehood has taken root in their brains.
It actually causes a long-lasting memory error.
Brains of those people who changed their memories showed high activity, not just in the hippocampus, where memories are stored, but also in a part of the brain that is connected with emotional and social responses, the amygdala.
One thing we know about memory is it doesn't work like a videotape recorder. You don't just record the event and play it back later, but rather it's malleable and it's susceptible to distortion, contamination, and other influences.
She asked me to study these faces. Then, after a few minutes, she gave me a memory test.
Which of these two faces do you recognize from the original study phase?
Right. Left.
Okay.
And I said left, but I wasn't 100% sure. And then the tricky part. Oh. Well, I'll tell you why I'm stymied. Because I just picked this one on the left 2 seconds ago. But now I'm not sure, because those two look very much alike to me. But I'm going to tell you the left. But I was wrong. It was the one on the right. And that's the whole point of the study. Loftus explained how, like her study subjects, I had been duped.
You saw this face, then I gave you a test where I presented you with an altered face.
Oh my gosh.
Along with a novel one. So I pretty much induce you to pick a wrong face because I don't even have the real guy there. It's an altered version. And later on, when you now have a choice between the altered one and the real one, you stuck with your altered left choice.
She says the more recent memory contaminates the original.
It turns out that we actually sometimes believe that things happen to us or even have memories for things that never happen.
Como vimos nos vídeos anteriores, as memórias podem facilmente ser criadas e alteradas. Mas será que algumas pessoas seriam mais suscetíveis à alteração da memória do que outras? Alguns estudos mostram que há uma correlação entre tendências de criação de memórias falsas com fatores como suscetibilidade hipnótica aumentada e maior tendência à dissociação e absorção. Esses mesmos fatores estão correlacionados com a crença em experiências anômalas. Então a dúvida que fica é: seriam certos relatos de experiências anômalas baseados em falsas memórias?
Segundo especialistas, propensão à fantasia é uma característica de pessoas com alta suscetibilidade hipnótica. São pessoas com imaginação bastante vívida, que tendem a confundi-la com a realidade, reportando uma alta incidência de experiências paranormais. Essas mesmas pessoas tendem a reportar traumas de infância, podendo estas ser um mecanismo de defesa, em que a criança vai de um mundo intolerável, em que não tem nenhum controle, para um mundo de imaginação, em que ela possui total controle. Tendências à dissociação podem ter a mesma origem, como um mecanismo de defesa para crianças lidarem com traumas de infância. A dissociação também está correlacionada com relatos retrospectivos de abuso infantil e relatos paranormais. Qual seria então a melhor explicação para a relação entre propensão à fantasia e relato de experiências paranormais? Segundo os céticos, a crença no paranormal seria fruto de uma imaginação hiperativa. Pessoas com esse tipo de imaginação teriam experiências anômalas falsas, que as levariam a ter crença no paranormal. Outra explicação seria que o relato de experiências paranormais e traumas de infância estariam baseados em falsas memórias. Alguns parapsicólogos combatem essa ideia e dizem que a imaginação vívida levaria à crença no paranormal, que por sua vez seria um fator favorável para que essas pessoas passem por experiências anômalas reais. Não é possível tirar nenhuma conclusão precisa. Por enquanto, podemos apenas assumir que existe uma correlação entre crença no paranormal e criação de falsas memórias.
Nesse vídeo, trabalhamos os conceitos de verdade, realidade e crença, e de como eles estão atrelados à formação de nossa memória, e como distorções podem ocorrer, devido à amnésia, memórias inseridas e até mesmo por sugestão hipnótica. Trabalhamos também o processo pela qual a memória é formada, e aspectos como atenção, compreensão, armazenamento e recuperação. Vimos como pode ser perigosa a confiança apenas em nossa memória. Vimos isso através de exemplos como testemunhas oculares e conceitos como teoria dos esquemas, memórias autobiográficas, falsas memórias, entre outras. O estudo da memória é essencial, não apenas para a compreensão de eventos que são julgados como sobrenaturais, mas também para a nossa constituição individual, pois o que somos, o que acreditamos e o que vivemos está intimamente ligado às nossas recordações. Entender os mecanismos pelos quais a memória se constitui é essencial para termos uma melhor compreensão daquilo que de fato vivemos, logo, daquilo que de fato somos.